What is a glue up? You've probably heard the term glue up in many forms of woodworking projects, so today I just kind of thought I would demystify the idea of what gluing up actually is and show you some of the options for that. So typically we're talking about a face style glue up. This is a very thin example of that, right? But this would be a face style glue up. And this clearly needs to be planed down, just kind of an example. But you could also do the end of a board glue up and come up with something like that, right? Where you're gluing the ends of a board together. If you just started with a piece of raw wood, it would look something like these boards here. If you can see that they are not planed or milled down at all, you can kind of see that gap. If you were to squeeze these together, it'd be pretty difficult to get, see right there, I can almost get them together, right? But not perfect. What we want to do is mill those down, plane them preferably. You can certainly sand them down as well, but if you have a planer like I have right over my shoulder here, I've already pre-planed some of these down so they're nice and smooth. Taking two of them together, you can see that now when we squeeze those together, we get a pretty good seam, right? So what is the point of gluing something up? It's to get bigger stock out of thinner stock, to get a bigger piece to work with, as well as getting some of those cool patterns that you get. As you can see, some of the darker boards there in between, you can get some of those cool patterns. You can cut this down, re-glue it up, and to get a checkered or any other type of pattern as well. But the idea of a glue up is typically to get a bigger piece of stock out of smaller boards. So I'm going to take these pallet boards that I've already planed, I'm going to cut them in half with the table saw, and then I'm going to do a glue up, creating a larger piece that I'm going to use for a future project. But I'm just going to run through the actual process of gluing these up. What you're going to need for a glue up is, of course, the wood, and then you're definitely going to need some glue. You don't necessarily need Titebond 3. This is a bit of overkill, as this is not a food safe project. You are also going to need any style of clamps. These are some smaller ones, so for a smaller project, those would certainly work. You have your normal style clamp like that, which you can certainly use, preferably, and most easy to use, are your parallel clamps. These are parallel clamps are the best and easiest to use for any type of glue up. So if you have those, great, but certainly not required. Any form of clamp, you can make it work. You're just gonna have to work on your angles and making sure it stays tight together. You can also use cross pieces of wood to go over top to hold everything together, but we'll dive into that as well. So I have all my stock over here already planed down. I'm gonna work on stripping that down to the relative same thickness and then create a panel that will then begin gluing up. So as I demonstrated with the rough cut lumber before, the reason you want to have a nice smooth edge on those faces, we're going to get the faces of each one of these tightened up to each other, all right? If you can see in the video, we've got some that are bowing every which way, up or down. Now that I have all the strips cut down, my objective here is to get them all basically squared up, at least on one side. As you can see, some of them are longer, but we can go in and trim either side When you're doing a glue up, that glue can cause the boards to shift. That could be either in or out that way, up or down. They can go any which way. That's where planing will come in, that will be able to bring those two sides back into flat, or taking these into a table saw or something like that to trim those sides down. But now the objective is to get these all as tight as we can in together, glued, as well as getting the boards pushed up or down as much as we can towards each other. We can also use some counter bracing that would help do that. With the boards that I'm using here, it's all pallet wood. It's not any type of perfect stock. So we have some bowing down, we have some bowing up. I could attempt to flip them to where they're all bowing the same direction. But ultimately, I can also just find that middle by planing them later. I will, while I'm gluing them, attempt to get those to push towards each other as best I can, and then I'll make that cleanup on the other side. But for the next step, we're gonna take each one of these pieces, we're gonna lay them down, and we're gonna glue them up one by one. So there's that term, glue them up. We're just gonna put glue on the face of each one of these. They have rollers that work really nice for this. I'm just gonna be using my finger. I'm gonna put some glue on each one. I'm gonna spread it with my finger. You can put glue on both sides. That'll really help the boards come together. You do get a lot more squeeze out like that. So that's kind of a preference thing, but you do want to make sure that there is enough glue coating both sides of the board. That way when they do come together, you see some of that squeeze out and you know that the entirety of that inside is glued up. That's what's really going to hold those together and bond them. Once that cures, that's what's going to make that seam basically invisible. And that's what we're going for, is for the seam in between each board to basically look like that board is one. As with some of my other videos, I have a piece of coroplast here. It's cut down to the width of the project that I've got. This will just kind of help me move it around when I go to put it on the clamps, but otherwise I'm gonna get this underneath. It also helps catch some of that glue rather than that going on my bench. Time to go ahead and start applying glue. Per usual, I'm using the good old-fashioned mustard bottle, just repurposed for some of my glue. Don't necessarily care if it gets all glued up or anything like that, because again, it's a used mustard bottle. There are some pretty good looking glue bottles out there that you can get. I've got my eye on a couple that I'm gonna be grabbing and then probably doing a review on them in the future. But for now, good old fashioned mustard bottle works perfect for me. And so there's a few different ways you could do this. You could lay all the boards down and apply glue just across them all at once. You could use a roller to go across every single piece and then fold them up. Typically, I'm working in a pretty small space, so I'm just doing a couple boards at a time, stacking them onto each other, and then working a little bit at a time like that. Takes a little bit longer maybe this way versus doing them all at once. Maybe it's exactly the same amount of time. I'll let you be the determiner on that, but otherwise this is how I do it. So just start applying the glue. And as I mentioned, we want to make sure that it covers the whole face of the board. If you don't have enough, you just reapply as you're going. And certainly you could overdo it with glue. You don't want to necessarily waste it, as that is an expense, but you do want to make sure you have enough that it's going to completely cover the face of each board. That's the important part, and that's what gives you those perfect seams. And some squeeze out. That's what we want to see. That's how we know that we did get good coverage in there. And of course, squeeze out is some waste. Another thing to consider is the dry time of the glue. So you don't want to necessarily glue up more pieces than you can keep up with spreading and applying the faces to each other. So depending on which glue you're using, might have a different dry time. So just be aware of that. gonna go ahead and brace some of them, just ensure I'm not getting any glue drying prematurely, as it is taking a little while to get this glued up. And again, you just want to be conscious of that setting time. Now I'm going to bring these two sections together. You don't necessarily need to do what I did as far as pre-clamping them, but just to make sure I didn't have any type of setup before I was ready. I didn't want to have any issues there. And again, there are some better glue applicator answers out there that would make this process maybe a little easier. But I'm going off of what I have versus buying every single tool, showing that you are able to do it with what you've got. All you need is some glue, your finger, and then any of your normal tools. In this case, so far all I've used is a table saw to strip these down. Prior to that was a hammer to pull the pallets apart. And there we are. Since I have it on the Coroplast, I can easily lift it up onto the clamp. You could certainly build these directly on the clamp as well. I found that it's not necessarily providing me the most workable area. You want to get the clamps close to the edge. And start squeezing them together. The more clamps you can put on a project, the better, to ensure getting all those seams as close together as possible. You could also alternate the clamps. Some say that that's best to do, but since I'm using parallel clamps, I feel that this will work just fine. If you don't have parallel clamps, I found these worked pretty well for me in the beginning. I just laid them across a project like that to help prevent this from bowing as much as I could, because when you start clamping down on this style clamp, it does tend to bow here in the middle. But otherwise, you can line up the center on each side here, and then just start clamping. And that's it. As you can see, there's a little bit of a bow there, but they do work really well. You just got to be aware of what that might be doing to your project, if it's causing your project to bow. So whichever style clamp you have, whether it's these, whether it's the parallels, I suggest using what you have for the task at hand as best you can before necessarily investing in an additional tool. Unless you just have a bunch of money, then great, but like myself, I'm on a budget, so I gotta buy the things that make the most sense for me at the time. So for a long time, these clamps worked perfectly. Now I've been able to move into some parallel clamps with these Bremens here, but otherwise, these don't necessarily do anything that I can't get done with these. They just do make it a little bit more easy to set up the glue up process. But again, if you've got this style or if you got a different style, you could probably make those work. With that, I'm just gonna let this cure overnight for the next 24 hours at least. Then we'll move into planing it down, which you could do with a planer if you have one. Otherwise, you could sand this. As you can see, I got some shifting here. This section's lower than this section. So I'm gonna have to bring everything down to this lowest point, basically. And I'll have to do that on both sides. So at the end of this, I started with about 1.5 inches of wood. I might only end up with 1.25 inches. We'll see, depending on how much has to be taken out of each side. You could lose as much as 1/2 inch, just depending on how much shifting you get. So we'll see how that turns out tomorrow, and we'll go from there. The glue up's dried overnight. Now I'm gonna go ahead and take off all the clamps. I did go ahead and leave this extra one on there, because why not? back here, if I had cut a piece of coroplast to cover the whole thing, it would come right off. And all this glue would have been stuck just basically to that. As you can see, instead of on the table here as well. So as you can see, it doesn't look like much. Looks pretty ugly. Lots of glue, excess glue from all that squeeze out, but all of that's gonna clean up real easily, especially if you have a planer. You can certainly do it with a palm sander, but a planer is gonna work much better. And it's just super simple. You're just gonna run this through. I'm gonna run it through just a little at a time. We do have to get to some of those low points. So it looks like right here or right here might be my low point. But we'll figure that out as we go. Maybe it's about a little over 1/16 of an inch, maybe pushing 1/8 of an inch. We'll just see as we get there. We'll probably find a similar gap on the opposite side as well. So all in all, we might lose 2/16 of an inch off this overall diameter here that I had cut out at just 1/16 of an inch over 1.5 inch. Just leaving myself a little bit of room there based on being able to cut these planks that I had in half. That was about the halfway mark for each one. Some of them had a little excess that I lost, but finding the median over all the planks that I had to come up with a decent one there. So everything's all dry and ready to go through the planer. I went ahead and ran this through the table saw as well. I cut it down to a 12-inch width, as well as made sure I had a square side on both sides when I ran it through the table saw, using a level kind of as my joiner there. And then here's the chunk that I cut off from that original glue up. This will end up getting planed down as well and repurposed into either struts or legs, although it'll be some sort of piece for that final build, even though I'm not sure what that final build is going to be, but this will get reused into that final project. As you can see, again, it's not much to look at. It looks ugly. There's glue everywhere. I'm going to run it through the planer, starting with 1/16 of an inch at each time I pass it through, just to get to these low points. And then I'll flip it over, do the same. After running it through the planer, we're going to have a nice finished top and bottom. Might have to square up the edges again because I'm not going to do any type of bracing from these high and low points. So we'll see. That could cause some rocking and cause the top and bottom to be off from the sides, but I'll take a 1/16 of an inch or something off the sides to get those back to square. But just get to running it through the planer and show you what a glue up can look like after putting it all together, even though it starts out looking real ugly. Just 3 passes there and all of this is perfectly flat. So I'm going to flip it over and start getting to the other side there. So after trimming it down with the planer, getting all of the sides level with anything that had slipped, I'm down to 1 3/16. I actually lost 3/8 of an inch by any of that slip out. So again, that's where some of the boards had gone this way and some had gone the other way, causing little gaps on both sides. And you got to bring it into the center from both sides. You got to find that perfectly flat side. If you can see that, got a perfectly smooth flat side. I've got a little knot there. I knew that was going to be there when I put it together. You could totally plan for that to be on the end or on a part that you're going to cut off, but things like that you could also fill in with epoxy or some CA glue or something like that. CA glue is going to take you a little while to get that to cure correctly, couple layers, lots of layers, but otherwise that could also just be the bottom of your project, and it could be character, it could be the underside, perfectly okay as well. I also have a spot here, if you can make that out here, that where the boards did not come together perfectly. So that will also be a spot that I'll be doing some sort of a touch up, whether it's CA glue or maybe doing some sort of a filler. Typically I don't like filler so much, so that might be a CA glue for me. And that shadow just will come out as kind of like, look like a grain, which is perfectly fine as well after you finish it with some polyurethane or something like that. Now that this is all planed up, it still will get finished with a bunch of sanding to get a real nice finish, and that will cause those grains to pop real nice, getting them down to a decent high grit. And you could have totally done this without a planer. You could use a sandpaper or palm sander, I mean, from the start of this to get this all the way down, or maybe a belt sander would be better. But if that's all you have, a sander could certainly do all this as well. You would want to take your time maybe on getting those pieces to glue up a little more close without letting any slip out happen, which could also be obtained by maybe only gluing up small sections at a time, where you can really control some of that slip out. But then you could totally just finish this down with a palm sander instead of needing a planer. So just something to consider if that's the tool you got and you don't have a planer. Don't let that deter you. Glue ups are still possible. Palm sander and just maybe a little more time. Again, you could glue them up in smaller sections, maybe 6 pieces, 5 pieces, whatever you decide to do. And then you can glue those sections to each other at that point and totally have very marginal slip out where you don't really have to take off too much material with that sander. But again, it's just gonna be a little more extra time if that's the route you have to go, but totally doable. Again, glue ups are super simple. As you can see, I didn't do anything special. I didn't do anything super elaborate setup. There's lots of jigs that you could make to make glue ups even easier, more smooth, less glue waste, lots of things that could go into it, lots of different glue applicators you could use as well. I just wanted to show that you can do a glue up as long as you got some clamps, you got some glue, you got the wood, you can do a glue up. It is best to get those smooth faces as I suggested in the beginning, but you could certainly do a rough one as well. But if you have rough, like I have this little line here, you could potentially get a whole bunch of those throughout the project. But of course that could be maybe the style of the project you're gonna do. Maybe you're gonna put epoxy over the top. You know, it could create a finish that actually comes out pretty nice if that's what you're targeting. But if you want a completely smooth seam, you wanna make sure that you get nice finished faces before you do a glue up. And then again, you saw how much glue was all over this thing before I planed it down. And yet that looks pretty darn beautiful at this point. So now I'll square it up on the sides. As you can see, lots of shift out had happened on either side as well. So I'm gonna cut the side down. I'll take the shortest one and that'll be my edge there. I'll do the same for this other side. That's a much more prominent spot of how that kind of happened. And hey, if you decided that could be some character to a project, depending on what you're trying to go for, that could be part of your finishing right there too. Not that that's how I'm gonna do it, but you could. So I'll be squaring these sides up as well. And as I mentioned, I'm not actually sure what I'm gonna do with this. It will not be going to waste. I'm in between doing a bench, so like a seating stool, like a bench, entry bench or something like that. Put your shoes on, or potentially doing like an end table with 2 tiers, thinking the top and then the middle with some legs. The legs will also be made out of it. Like this little piece that I have sitting right here that I cut off from the project itself, that will become struts or potentially legs. I'll also glue up some more pieces to make legs or struts or whatever other piece of that build that I'm gonna need once I decide what I'm actually gonna go for. But again, this was only meant to show what a glue up is. So what do you guys think I should do with it? Should I finish it as a bench, as it's kind of already taken that shape? Or I could trim it down, it could be an end table, it could have 2 tiers, a top, a middle, it could be like a couch end table or something like that, or something completely outside of that. If you guys have any ideas, put them in the comments. I'm gonna take the top rated ones, and whichever ones those are, I'm gonna run with that and see what we can turn out of it. I'll give this video a few weeks for those comments to build up, and then I will move forward with finishing that project. And then you can look for that finished piece of furniture in a future build video. All right, guys, thanks again so much for watching. If you like what I'm doing here, please like and subscribe. You know how important that is for building a channel, building any type of this content going forward. So I appreciate your support. If there's anything you'd like to see me do in the future, or any comments, any suggestions for improvement, or anything that you'd have, leave those in the comments. I definitely read them all. I'll respond to them all. And otherwise, yeah, I'll catch you on the next video when we're making some more sawdust. Thanks.